Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host, Kidu Nyasha, and board opping is Lydia Blanco. I'm very pleased to announce our very special guest coming to us from New Jersey via Skype. Glenn Ford, a veteran of more than 40 years in broadcast, print, and internet journalism, is a former Washington bureau chief and White House, Capitol Hill, and State Department correspondent. He co-founded and hosted America's Black Forum, the first nationally syndicated black news interview program on commercial television, launched and owned the radio syndications Black World Report, Black Agenda Reports, and Wrap It Up, the first national hip-hop music show. He has worked as a radio newsman in Washington, Baltimore, and Georgia, and produced over 1,000 radio and TV commercials. Ford has edited or served as staff reporter for 3 newspapers, was national political columnist for Encore, American, and Worldwide News magazine, founded the Black Commentator and Africana Policies magazines, and authored The Big Lie, an analysis of U.S. media coverage of the Grenada invasion. On the internet, Ford co-founded blackcommentator.com in 2002 and blackagendareport.com in 2006, a weekly magazine of news, commentary, and analysis from the Black left, for which he's currently the executive editor. Ford hosts and produces the weekly 1-hour Black Agenda radio program on the Progressive Radio Network, as well as 2 weekly radio commentaries that air on approximately 40 radio stations. Welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Glenn Ford, I'm delighted to have you here.
And I'm honored to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And well, let's get right to some of the most serious business at hand, which is the U.S. has once again gotten us into another war, and this time it's Syria. Do you want to take off on that, Glenn?
Yeah, the United States is now in a very deep crisis. It's tried to ride the jihadist tiger, that is, to use Islamic militants as the foot soldiers of imperialism. And that's been an integral part of U.S. policy in that part of the world for 3 decades now. It began in Afghanistan when a leftist government took over there in 1979. The United States immediately began funding and training and arming Islamist fighters in that country, along with their partners in that crime, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And by doing so, they sucked the Soviet Union into a war that it did not want in Afghanistan. And that relationship between the United States and these Saudi and Pakistani-backed jihadists has matured and continued over these last 30 years. When the United States and the Europeans, and especially the monarchs of the Persian Gulf, felt that the political situation in the Middle East was threatened when the Mubarak in Egypt was overthrown and there was a revolution in Tunisia. The United States and his Saudi and Qatari allies called once again on the jihadist fighters and funded and armed them, but more importantly, acted as an air force for them in Libya. And after, I think it was a 6-month bombing campaign and the killing of Muammar Gaddafi, those jihadists took power. But there in Libya is where the crisis of this collaboration, this 30-year collaboration began, because it became clear that the jihadists had their own worldview and they had their own goals, their own priorities, and they were not about to just hand the power over to whoever the United States and France and Saudi Arabia said should be the new government in Libya. And so Libya still doesn't have a government. At the same time that they were launching that campaign against Libya, the United States and the same allies began their regime change operation against Syria with the same chemistry, by sending in jihadists with the aim of toppling the regime. And now that contradiction has become acute. The people who now call themselves the Islamic State, before that they were ISIS, they now number, according to the CIA, at least 30,000 fighters. They get bigger and bigger because they are absorbing many of the other jihadist groups that the United States and its allies have been funding in Syria. Now they have decided that they are going to go their own way. So they proclaimed a caliphate and essentially declared war not just on the United States, but upon the Saudis, and the Kuwaitis and the United Arab Emirates and Jordan and the royal government in Qatar. They've declared those regimes to be illegitimate. So a general crisis now exists, in addition, of course, to attacking and seizing large portions of Iran. So a general crisis exists, and it's not just the crisis for the people of Syria. It's not just a crisis for the people of Iran. The United States loves making crises for those kinds of people. It's a crisis now of U.S. imperialism, because they now don't have any foot soldiers they can depend upon. They don't have a force that they can treat like a mercenary and sick them on this government or that. Now there is a kind of Islamist movement that has broken loose, and it has its own mind, and it becomes a problem. And so the U.S. finds itself bombing the same people that it has armed and trained all these years. I guess, and this is my hunch, that what Obama is trying to do with his bombing campaign, while he still maintains his mission to overthrow the government of Syria, what he's trying to do is discipline these rebellious jihadists to display overwhelming force in the hopes that when they see what it's like to be under U.S. firepower, they'll get back in line and be good jihadists and just cut off the heads of those that the U.S. wants the heads cut off of. We'll see how that works. I don't think those days are coming back again.
And I mean, it's obvious that the U.S. wants a regime change in Syria and wants to get rid of Hafez al-Assad. But at the same time, the bombing is of so-called ISIS, the un-Islamic State, is kind of making him an ally of Assad. I mean, it's getting very messy and very unpredictable, because on the one hand they want Assad out, they want a regime change. On the other hand, all of a sudden they're saying ISIL as Levant, as opposed to Syria, and that tells me that there's some kind of unholy alliance going on, or secretive alliance going on with Assad.
No, they'd like you to think that, but that's when I say they, the other jihadists would like you to think that. But it's not the case. The United States is still intent, by hook or crook, to get rid of Assad. It just doesn't have the troops to do so. And it's walking a real tightrope with this bombing campaign. It wants to hurt the Islamic State badly enough that it can discipline the other jihadists that haven't yet gone over to ISIS yet. But it doesn't want to kill so many, to wreak so much havoc that their fellow Islamists who haven't gone over will, in solidarity, then make common cause with ISIS, because then the United States and its allies will be the targets of a general jihad throughout the region. And you think you've seen chaos already? You ain't seen nothing yet. if that happens.
I know, because they're spread out in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and possibly Lebanon at this point.
Yes, they have brought that kind of war to Lebanon. The United States, if its goal was to bring chaos to the region, has certainly succeeded. But I think they're finding that they can't manage chaos, and chaos is not just a swirl of activity. It's not inchoate. Things happen inside chaos. ISIS happened inside chaos.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the lesson that we're learning.
Well,
So even if the U.S. goal was to create constant and continual and eternal chaos in the region, if it could not succeed in outright overthrowing Assad, that is turning out to be a failure as well, because chaos does not just create destruction for the people on the ground. It creates new forces that you're not necessarily able or equipped to handle. And that's the stage that we're at today.
Right, and what do you think? What are your thoughts about the Iran and the overtures that Obama has been making to try to enlist his help again? It's crazy.
It's hard to enlist the help of Iran when you basically have embargoed its oil.
Exactly.
Iran was, I think, at one point, the number 4 oil exporter in the world. And now, because of U.S. sanctions, they're down to 1 million barrels a day. They're not a major player anymore. So Iran's not about to enter into any kind of long-term understanding, even with the United States, when its lifeblood, the resource that keeps its economy going, is still shackled by the United States. And I think the Iranians will never trust any American president further than they can throw him, because they're absolutely untrustworthy. And that's another byproduct of the current state of affairs in the Middle East, that no one's going to trust an imperialism that uses up its allies and throws them away as soon as it is convenient. Who's going to make alliances with that kind of guy? You can't make a friend with a person who or a state that does not understand the meaning of alliance and of friendship.
Yeah, Iraq being a prime example.
That's right. Saddam Hussein was a great ally of the United States. The United States was of great assistance in his coming to power in Iraq. The United States was most afraid that the Iraqi Communist Party, which was one of the most developed and oldest in the region, would have an influence in Iraq's development. So they gave young thug Saddam Hussein a list of all the communists that needed killing once he came to power, and he went down that list and fulfilled his contract with the United States. In the end, the United States hung him.
Yeah, well, not only that, but he also helped them fight an 8-year war along with France back up against Iran.
Yep, which the Iranians call the American War.
Right, exactly. So they didn't succeed, and Iran is still there, and now they're doing this phony nuclear number on them and the sanctions, as you mentioned.
All this, of course, is a desperate bid that now is worldwide to encircle and contain both China and Russia. And that's a bridge too far.
Yes.
Even the United States, with all of its weapons and technology, cannot contain the economic explosion of China and its trading partners. That's just impossible. In fact, what it really means is the United States has positioned itself against the productive forces of the world, that it is a weight on the growth of the world's emerging economies, which are eager to do business with China and would like to do more business with Russia. And Russia would like to become a more integral part of that community. And that's the way the world is logically going. Except the United States stands in the way and not only terrorizes the world with its weapons, but the U.S. stunts the growth of the world by impeding the connections among nations and peoples that should take place.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about was the I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. The war on terror is a virtual endless war because terrorism is a tactic and a strategy, and a terrible one, of course. But a war on terror is indicative of an endless war, and it seems to me that is great for the so-called defense industry. I call the industry of offense because it certainly isn't defending anyone. And so all these new wars and all these new aggressions and everything are constantly feeding the war machine, and tons of money are being made. And I also wanted to touch on Israel's role, because Israel has been kind of quiet, kind of behind the scenes during this so-called ISIS crisis. You haven't heard much about Israel except that they're quietly building new settlements in Palestine and the West Bank.
Yes, they're quite happy. What you do hear is lots of sick laughter coming out of Israel. Israel's foreign policy, 100% of its foreign policy since the establishment of that state has been to wreak havoc and chaos and disunity among all of its neighbors, that is, among all Arabs and folks who are allied or seem to ally or might one day become allied with Arabs. So that is Israeli policy. So it foments wherever it can, and its intelligence services are the best in the world. It foments frictions among its Arab neighbors. And so from the Israeli standpoint, looking out of their window and their view of the world, this is heaven. What is hell for the rest of the region is heaven for them, because their mission in terms of foreign policy is to set neighbor against neighbor on the theory that if they're fighting each other, they won't fight or resist the Israelis. So they're in a good mood today. It's kind of satanic almost, isn't it? That the devil's in a good mood when everybody else is on fire.
Right. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the humanitarian aspects of all this conflict and the huge numbers of refugees and displaced persons that it's creating from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Palestine, from Gaza. I mean, well, not Gaza, because Gazans can't leave. It's an open-air prison. But they're displaced inside of Gaza. Talk about the enormous human suffering that's resulting from this warmongering.
Yeah, when people talk about the refugee crisis as it relates to Syria, they almost always confine that commentary to those people who have left Syria. And the coverage is such that they lead you to believe that everybody who has left Syria is leaving because of fear or hatred of the government of Syria. Well, first of all, that's not true. that all the refugees, or even the great bulk of them, have left because of fear of the government. People leave because their neighborhood has been rendered uninhabitable, and it's been rendered uninhabitable by the chaos fomented by the United States, and it's essentially paid jihadists. So the whole refugee crisis can be laid at the feet of the U.S. and its Arab and Turkish allies. But again, we need to include in the victims, the refugee victims in Syria, those who are internally displaced.
Yeah.
What does it matter if you're living in horrific conditions and you're in a strange part of your own country or a strange part of a strange country? You still are in dire straits. And so there are several million within Syria who are internally displaced.
Right.
And that's also the fault of those who started this conflagration. And since we're in that part of the world and we're talking about refugees and whose fault is it, the greatest refugee crisis on the planet until these recent developments was in Iraq, where 4 million people were displaced, not just inside Iraq, but had to leave the country. The overwhelming proportion of those folks were Sunni, which
focus a little bit.
Contributed greatly to the unrest among Sunnis in that region. 4 million, mostly Sunni Iraqis, had to leave their homes because of the U.S. invasion and occupation. And I just want to say one more thing about refugees since we're on the subject. The other great refugee crisis, which was only eclipsed by Iraq and by now Syria, is in Colombia. Colombia, for a very long time, had the largest internally displaced population in the world, the overwhelming proportion of them, black Colombians. And Colombia, of course, is a semi-colony of the United States, its last stand in South America.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully that won't last too much longer. Anyway, I would like to kind of bring things back home to the domestic scene, and I thought maybe we could just make the bridge Israel, because Israel Israel is training
is the 51st state, or are we the province of?
Oh, that's a good one. You're absolutely dead on it. I've said before on this same program that nobody can stay in Congress without AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee that is pro-Israel. So Israel is practically running the show. And they are now training police forces to, and the U.S. is cooperating quite well by transferring tanks and machine guns and Uzis and all kinds of heavy weaponry to our domestic police forces. And we see some of the results of the escalation and the militarization of the police forces in this country, particularly in Ferguson.
That's right. And you know, if we talk about Israel just for a little bit, since you introduced it with Israel, the Congressional Black Caucus, every single voting member, all 40 who could vote on the House floor, went along with the unanimous House resolution that gave a blank check to Israel 3 days after the Israelis started bombing Gaza.
And 100% of the Senate.
Black congressperson assented to that. It was a voice vote, but it was unanimous. There was no dissent. No one objected before or after the vote. None of them can get out of it. They were part of the unanimous vote on behalf of Israel. And that is just it is more than a shame.
It is. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting. And 100% of the Senate, by the way, voted to send more military aid to Israel in the middle of their horrible, horrific attacks on Gaza. I thought
So
that was
we can segue with this Congressional Black Caucus, the same one that kowtows to Israel. Well, all of Congress had a chance back in June with the introduction of the Grayson Amendment to halt the Pentagon's constant transfers of military weapons and gear to local police departments. Alan Grayson, he's a white liberal congressman from Florida. His amendment would have called a halt to that. When it came up for a vote, 27 of the Congressional Black Caucus voted against it.
oh,
5 abstained, like they couldn't figure out which way to go. And only 8 members of the caucus voted for the amendment that would have cut off this flow of weapons and such from the Pentagon to places, well, to your city and mine. And yet, these Congress people pretend that they are shocked and appalled and up in arms about what went down in Ferguson. They're the ones who sent the guns there. They're the ones who had a chance to shut off the flow of armor gear to Ferguson's and LA's and New York City's in June, and they rejected that chance. No one should listen to a word they say about that issue ever again. They have spoken. They spoke with their votes. And people should speak with their votes in terms of sending them back to Congress to commit more offenses against our people.
I know what you mean. I think this is the perfect time to mention the Eric Holder's resignation and what he's done or not done. Do you want to go for it?
Well, you know, Eric Holder, as the U.S. Attorney General, has been involved with almost everything that the Obama administration has done, because the Attorney General's job is kind of unique. He has to not pass judgment on, but have input into all executive branch decisions as they have a legal impact. And that means on domestic and foreign policy. So if we're talking about Eric Holder's legacy, if by that we mean the totality of what he has had a hand in doing for or to the world, it's a big menu, because it encompasses almost everything that the Obama administration has done. But I think that when people talk about legacy, they should be discussing those actions that a political figure has taken in his or her life that will have impact on generations in the future, the really important things. And so if we can limit the discussion to the really important things that Eric Holder has been involved in, well, the two most important, the two lasting and enduring parts of his legacy are, 1, preventive detention,
Yes.
and 2, impunity for Wall Street. Nothing comes close in terms of impact on future generations to what he's done in those arenas. In terms of Wall Street, when he said that he was hesitant to prosecute banks because that might do harm to the world economy, and that was interpreted as the Attorney General of the United States saying the banks were too big to jail. What he was really saying is, I will not protect the public from the depredations of this class of criminal. They not only have impunity to commit crimes at will, but we will not protect the rest of the public from the impact of the crimes committed by this class. And who is this class? This is a class overwhelmingly comprised of white males. So he has given impunity from the law to a class of white males and laid us bare and defenseless to their depredations. I don't think there's anything comparable to that since the days of slavery and Jim Crow, when white men had impunity in terms of committing crimes against blacks, and black people couldn't testify in criminal courts against white people. Nothing has been articulated since that time that's like that, comparable to that, until Eric Holder opened his mouth and said essentially that this class of white men has a get out of jail free card for as long as there is a problem with the economy. The other part of his legacy that I think will go down in history is that preventive detention. When Eric Holder said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing him here, that due process of law does not mean that those who are accused have the right to access to the courts. That is, due process is any process that the government says it is. Well, if due process of law is whatever the government says it is, then there is no damn law. Without due process, the whole edifice of the legal system falls apart. And once again, the people are naked to the government. Nobody had articulated this, not certainly in this century, in the way that Eric Holder did. That due process does not mean access to the courts. And so he, of course, along with his fellow Ivy League lawyer, Barack Obama, has really set the bar in terms of the legal system back possibly centuries. Possibly back to the Magna Carta
with the
that we were all taught about in school, that a man had the right, it was men back in those days, that a man had the right to face his accuser and have a trial. Eric Holder says that's not true. I think that's something for the ages, and that's not a good thing. Now, those are the most important things in Eric Holder's career. Both of them are very, very negative. The problem we have internally, I'm talking about black folks, is that too many black folks think that the grade rating that Obama and Holder get, whether they are judged to be good attorneys general and president or bad attorney generals and presidents, whether they get failing marks or good grades, is somehow a mark against or for our people, that we're being judged by Obama and Eric Holder's behavior while in office. And that not only is a very immature way to look at the world, it's also self-defeating because it ties us irrevocably to politicians who do not have our interests at heart, who are ready to strip us of our citizenship rights to due process, who are ready to leave us defenseless in the face of a Wall Street gone mad, and yet we cling to them as if we are them. And if we do, we go down with their ship. And so it's a very self-defeating way to look at the political situation.
I would like you to focus in on two acts that were passed under the Obama administration, the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011, which
the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011 is
that's the disappearing act.
Detention bill.
Yeah, that's
and I want to mention that George Bush said he believed that a president has the inherent right, since he's the commander-in-chief, to hold people, to detain people, to arrest people without trial or charge. But that was his opinion. It was not enshrined in law. And George Bush never went to Congress to try to make that into a law. The reason that he never tried to get a law passed that would state in a statute which he felt the president's powers already were, was because he knew that the Congress would not pass that law while he was president. that Democrats would resist it. And just like a Republican minority in Congress can gum up the works and stop things from being passed, so could a Democratic, certainly majority in Congress, stop Republican bills from being passed. So George Bush didn't even try. It took the election of a black Democrat and his black attorney general to go to the Congress and get them to pass the bill that George Bush knew would not be successful under him. And that is the bill that you just cited, the Defense Authorization Act.
And which means that basically you or I or anyone can simply be disappeared.
That's right. And in fact, you or I or anyone can be disappeared based on laws that are now secret. And this is new with the Obama administration. They now have laws whose very existence are secret. Yes. They are classified. The reason for the law is classified. Everything about the law is classified, except that you and I can be arrested under those laws. And of course, secret laws are no laws at all. How can you have a civilization in which the laws are secret? That means that the citizenry doesn't know when they're breaking the law or not. They just know when the knock comes in the night and someone says, "You broke one of our laws, come with us."
Right. No.
Which one?
And that's
really none of your business.
That's very scary that they can just come and take you out of your home and disappear you. But but the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about was, I myself was a plaintiff in a wiretap lawsuit that was filed in New Haven, Connecticut, behind the Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins trial, the two capital trials of Panthers in New Haven. And it was settled out of court and won because they did wiretap us. But now, under the Patriot Act, they can, and as Snowden exposed, the national security agents' incredible spying and on everybody. It's monitoring of all of us. I mean, wiretapping and monitoring emails and just invading everyone's privacy. It's perfectly legal now under the Patriot Act. So they have taken it to a much higher level now. It's not just monitoring people one at a time. It's not just monitoring all the people all the time. What they are now doing is keeping track through computers and elaborate algorithms of all of your contacts and then all of the contacts of your contacts. So one jump, in the way they explain it, one jump would mean everybody that I talked to on the phone in the past month. That would be the universe of people that they would be authorized to monitor the conversations with at a one jump level. But President Obama wants a two-jump level of monitoring. He promises he won't go beyond 2 jumps. But 2 jumps means that all of the calls made by everybody that I called this month would also be monitored. The reason that they've set up these kinds of algorithms is so that they can discern who is interacting with whom, what kinds of human networks are out there. They believe that they can see the outlines of networks of people in society just by figuring out who talks to who and who talks to them that talks to somebody else. The end result of this kind of monitoring is to put together a whole schematic that shows who is potentially an enemy of the United States, who all of
his friends are and who their friends are, and all of those people will be assumed to be part of a network of people who are dangerous. And when the time comes to lock up the dangerous people, they just go to the algorithm, and it's 2 hops away, and that's hundreds and hundreds of people for every person in the first hop.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty scary, but
that's how they'll allocate the cells if they're going to lock us all up in cells, or whatever other ways they want to arrange to hold us or dispose of us. It's all in the algorithms now, and that's not some wild conspiracy. That's what analysts in this trade have divined from the kinds of spying that they're doing.
right. The other thing that Obama has done is he has deported more people than any other president in history.
Yes, and it's Thursday, so I think that tonight is when the Latinos are supposed to be picketing and bringing shame upon the Congressional Hispanic Caucus for not standing up. They're all Democrats, mostly anyway, in the caucus, for not standing up to this president, the biggest deporter of all time.
It's amazing, isn't it? It just blows your mind. But one of the things that I've noted, I think that they've succeeded. The reason they selected Obama was twofold. One, that they could get lots of things done that they couldn't get under a Bush, because
Like
we would have raised hell. So they've pacified essentially the rebels, the resistance.
They certainly have neutralized Black America.
Yes.
I'm 65, and in all of my adult life and teenagehood, I have never seen such quietude, such lack of rebellion, such a lack of desire to stand up to power as we're witnessing under this administration, and it has been achieved not by beating us down from the top, but by simply having a black man there. It's as if we are mystified.
We're certainly pacified. I can't believe it, because I got you by 10 years, and I've never seen us this passive. And we're normally on the front lines of any struggles that go down in America, because we're the most oppressed, the most with the most to gain and the least to lose from a change. And so we've always been on the front lines of struggle in America. And now, where the hell are we?
Last September, something happened that I never imagined would happen. When Obama was threatening to bomb Syria, we all remember back then, a poll was taken. I think it was Gallup, I'm not sure. Anyway, in this poll, for the first time in polling history, more black people said that they would favor bombing Syria than white people, percentage-wise. These were minorities in both cases, minorities of whites and minorities of blacks. Minorities wanted to bomb Syria, but notwithstanding that they were minorities, proportionately more black people wanted to bomb Syria than white people, and that is just counterintuitive. Is not the word. It was as if I could not recognize our people.
I know what you mean. It's terrible.
And it's because it was a black man who was about to do the bombing.
At the same time, however, he has fostered a hell of a white backlash against black people. So you see racism becoming so much more blatant and so much more strident than it has been in years.
But we can't control white people and their proclivities for racial outbursts. We can do something about the internal conditions in our own political situation in our own community. That we are capable of doing. We need a lot more internal struggle if we're going to reemerge as a politically healthy community from this age of Obama. Some bad things have happened internally with us during this period.
Well, I kind of think that we're going to have to become more international and base our alliances on politics as opposed to so-called race, noting there's one human race.
And that means fighting the Congressional Black Caucus, which, as we just discussed, went along with that unanimous vote in favor of Israel. If we have a caucus of 40 black representatives that makes common cause with an apartheid state, we have an internal black problem.
Yeah, we sure do. You're right about that. Except that I have my own. Well, that's another show about how we can change those dynamics and come up with a new paradigm politically and as far as our movement for liberation. One of the things I kind of still want to touch a little more on is the situation in Ferguson and what's going on there. Maybe you can share some of the latest information with our audience. We have about 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes.
I'm told that there's a big mobilization that's going to happen next weekend. That is going to involve civil disobedience and such. Folks from all over the country are involved, but what's more exciting than activists from all over the country coming to Ferguson is that folks tell me, and I'll do my own investigation next week, that there's some real activity going on at the grassroots among the young people, that they see clearly that what's necessary is organization, creation of real networks of folks who are united around principles and will express the will of the people and specifically the will of young people. Yeah, I remember I was in the Panther Party. Most of us were 18, 19, 20, 22 years old. We never thought of ourselves as a youth movement. That was never crossed our minds to think of ourselves that way. We thought of ourselves as soldiers. We thought of ourselves as trying to be leaders and examples to our people, but never as junior anything. And yet, in the intervening years, we've heard some young people complain that the old folks just won't move out of the way to make way for them. We, back in the 60s, never asked people to move out of the way. We made noise and made a movement, and folks could come along with it or stay behind. I hope, maybe I'm just being wishful, that this Ferguson moment is reigniting that kind of attitude among young people, that it is their obligation to lead this struggle, and that means that they have responsibilities to organize themselves.
Right, and I think they managed to get rid of Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, it seems like they in a way chased them out of town.
They chased them out.
They created a hostile environment for the snitch and the preacher.
Right. So, anyway, I've read some of your comments about Sharpton, and I don't know if you want to reiterate any of them, but
it's distasteful for me to talk about Sharpton, only
right.
if you insist.
We'll leave him alone. And we'll be glad to leave him alone. So, anyway, we have only a few minutes left, so I would like you to have that opportunity to share what final thoughts you would like to give our viewers.
Well, we were talking before we went on the air about Africa, and that is the most depressing region in terms of political developments.
Yes.
In the world, especially since the ascension of Barack Obama, whose time in office is roughly coterminous with the existence of AFRICOM, the U.S. military command in Africa. The United States has succeeded in subordinating, in making dependencies of virtually all of the militaries on the African continent. There are only three countries in Africa that do not have some kind of legal relationship with AFRICOM. That is Zimbabwe, Little Eritrea, and Sudan. All the rest are collaborating, cooperating, being trained by and armed by and kowtowing to the United States military through AFRICOM. And that means that not only are these governments in many ways subservient to the United States, especially in foreign policy, if not in trade policy, but these governments are now naked to any palace coups or barracks coups that the United States would foment, because the United States military is rather than focusing on opening up big autonomous bases in Africa, U.S. bases, they are now based in African armies bases. In other words, they are in barracks right next to the African troops, and the U.S. Officers go to the same officers' clubs as their African counterparts. And coups can be discussed and outlined and brought into motion over drinks at the officers' club with the Americans these days in almost any African country. So it's dark times right now.
It sure is. Well, all power to the people, and luta continua. We have to keep on struggling. Thank you so much, Glenn Ford, for joining us here on Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Thank Lydia Blanco for board opping, and liberate the continent, liberate the U.S. All power to the people.
Power to the people.
And free all political prisoners, and Sundiata Accola, release him now.
All right.